When we were planning this symposium, we had the idea that we would video the students, and then we decided, well, no, we should bring them because we want them to share in the experience. So we are delighted that they're all here, and we're very pleased that Jay, the editor of the Interest magazine, will facilitate this panel. And we want to hear what the students have to say, because after all, that's why we're here. Yeah. And if we are not meeting their expectations, then we're failure. And so we are very, very happy that each of them have joined us today. So Jay.
Thank you, Dr. Brisbane. Thank you, all of you, for being here at this Gift of Black Theological Education Symposium. Thank you to those who are joining us by live stream right now, who are watching this event. We're glad that you've joined us. I'm very pleased to moderate a panel, and a good moderator should blend into the background, so I will try to blend into this white background here and let the students actually have the word to say here. I'm thrilled that they're all here, and I'd like to start out this panel by just inviting each of the student panelists to introduce herself or himself and to say your name, what school you are a student at, and what you were doing when you decided to become a student. That is, were you an undergraduate or were you in a career? And if you could just explain that for us, and then we'll circle back around and find out more about you afterwards. So start out just very briefly, and we can just start at the far end.
Hi, my name is Antoinette Joyner. I am a student at the wonderful Hood Theological Seminary in Salisbury, North Carolina. What I was doing before I came to Hood, I was on the path of ministry in the AME Zion Church.
Good afternoon. My name is Yolande Petty, and I am a student at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to seminary, I was a banker.
Good afternoon. My name is Katrinka Johnson. I am a senior at Payne Theological Seminary, and I was a counselor voluntarily and a homemaker.
Good evening. My name is James Mumford. I attend Shaw University. Prior to Shaw, I was deeply in the community as I served a term as the local chapter of the NAACP president. I was also scoutmaster, traveling sports dad, things like that. I worked at the local community organization, Boys and Girls Club, all of that, just trying to give back to my community what I've been blessed to have in my life.
Good afternoon. My name is Micah Gaines. I am from the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology in Richmond, Virginia. Prior to seminary, I was an undergraduate student who was also serving the local church as the pastoral assistant to my father, Pastor Richard Gaines, at the Consolidated Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Jones. I'm a current student at Howard University School of Divinity. Prior to pursuing this journey, I was working in the education technology field.
Thank you, all of you. The first question I'd really like to ask is, why did you personally choose the school that you chose to attend? What was it that you were looking for, that you identified in the theological school that you chose that they had to offer? So it doesn't have to be in order, so feel free to jump in if you like, but keep it fairly brief so that everyone can have a word.
Well, I'll start. There was no other choice. I never thought of another school. It was always Hood Theological Seminary. I am a die-hard AME Zionite. I tell everybody I'm Zion-led, Zion-bred, and I'll be Zion-dead. It was always Hood Theological Seminary.
Well, I'll go. I chose Payne Theological Seminary due to the fact that it was an online school, and doing what I had been doing before deciding to go to seminary, it met my needs, and I could work with it, and it could work with me.
I chose Shaw actually because I could commute, and because I'm comfortable with my learning ability, I needed to be in the classroom. And then when I looked at the history and then the work that, as opposed to the work that I was doing in the community, and found out Shaw had so many, people, alumni justice work, and so forth, and just a great, group of people that come out of Shaw that were activists and theological scholars. I said, you know what, that's it. And when I, applied, I knew that I can come and commute and be a part of the environment. So for me, yeah, again, it was just Shaw, because that was the first school that I looked at and I said, I want to be there.
I chose STVU. I took the long route because I actually transferred from another institution. But the thing that really stood out about STVU was the strong community presence. It was a very nurturing environment. I could tell they really cared about me, not just as a clergy person, but as an African American. That really meant a lot to me. So that led to my transferring to STVU, where I am thriving now and graduating next summer.
I selected Howard University School of Divinity based on the legacy. When you're looking at the legacy of Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman, I decided that I wanted to answer the call and continue that legacy. But there's also a backstory to why I selected Howard. So back in 2015, my grandmother passed away, and the pastor that did the eulogy for my grandmother's funeral happened to be a Howard University School of Divinity alum. And at that time, I was considering theological education, but not necessarily at a black institution. And when I connected with him in the repass, unbeknownst to me, my father approached him and said, "Oh, my son wants to go to the same school as you." And I wasn't considering Howard at that time, but when he approached me and said, "I heard you're interested in Howard," something told me that just say yes. So I said, yes, I am interested in Howard. And the funeral in the church that he serves in at the time was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but he was also an adjunct faculty member at the University of Maryland College Park, which was about 10 minutes away from where I worked. So I met with them and had discussions, and basically it boiled down to whether or not I go to an institution that, number one, affirms my identity. It gives me the opportunity to exercise my agency. So in considering that, that's why I selected Howard University School of Divinity, and it's been a very fulfilling experience.
I chose the Interdenominational Theological Center because living in Cleveland is cold. Atlanta was nice. But not only that, there was no place like it in the world. I was looking for a place where I could learn not just to be me, but to work with people like me that represent various shades, various denominations. We have over 7 denominations represented on our campus. And I have the opportunity to work with each and every one of them. In the final determining factor, I also thought about it. I had a cousin that I grew up with who was killed by a drunk driver his prom weekend. And after he passed, we opened up a letter. He got a 4-year scholarship to Morehouse. The fact that ITC was in walking distance from Morehouse gave me consolation and approval. It let me know that I was approved to go here. And then being there, being taught by having great faculty and administrators, there's no place like it in the world, and I'm glad I made the decision.
I'm wondering, I'd love to hear from each of you, what is the most valuable thing that you've learned so far? And maybe even more, what do you need to still learn? And I know that's a little vague. It could be a certain course, it could be a certain skill, a leadership skill, it could be a certain outlook. But just what's been a highlight, and what do you still need to go to do? You want to jump in?
Well, I think, for me, the thing that I enjoy at Payne is the fact that I can be me. That when I went there, I was seeking to find out who am I as a Black person, and the religious experience that came before me, and what is it that I am to take with me once I leave the school. And I've gotten all of that and then some. What I desire more is to be able to go back and still be able to learn, even though I'm about to graduate. I still want to have that opportunity to go back and still learn some more from those who I sat under.
Yeah, I think for me too, it's the research and the discussion that we have at Shaw. We read a lot of books, we do a lot of papers, but our professors facilitate conversation too, discussion. And for me, a visually aided learner, it's always necessary that a picture be painted for me. And part of painting that picture is through discussion. And then I'm able to also interact with classmates and the professor, and you get to know people. So there's a sense of fellowship that you get and companionship that we build up there, build at Shaw. And then also just campus life in general. I love it because I come to a campus every day with people that look like me, that struggle just like me, that are trying their best to identify being Black and Christian in America. And so for me, that has always been a challenge. And I found out at Shaw and the students that are there, that we all come with those basic questions. What is it to be Black and Christian in America? And so Shaw helps form that and help us frame it and teaches us the language that we need. And so, it's just a spiritual moment for me. It's therapeutic for me because in my head I have all this stuff going. And to people in my home community, which I live in a education desert. But when I come to Shaw, I'm able to work this ball of information out, and with the help of the professors and everything. So I'm able to articulate what it is that I'm feeling and sensing.
And what is it that you need to know more of, that you so far haven't gotten but you're hoping to get?
I'm still learning. Again, I'm finishing my second year, moving into my senior year. And I was just talking to Dr. Bryant, and it's articulation. How to take everything that I've experienced and been exposed to, and then condensing it. And so as Dr. Keeney said, the people in my community can identify with the cup in which I put all this in. Because I can't go to them with all this theological discourse. I've tried that with my family. and they were like, my mom was like, boy, you better stop. You break that down to me so I can understand. And so that was an important experience because here I am with all of this knowledge. And I'm struggling to condense it. And that's just going to take time, I believe, and continue work to condense it in a way where people can identify that which I give them.
Eric, I think you were...
Yes. So I really wrestle with this question because there's a lot of experiences that benefited me at Howard, but if I was to choose a few, I would definitely start with the history of the Black church and understanding the formation of the Black church in America, when our enslaved ancestors engaged in forced migration, over into the colonies. In addition to that, I would also say Dr. Ware, who's in attendance, I took about 4 classes with Dr. Ware: Philosophy of Religion, Systematic Theology 1 and 2, as well as Black Theology. But one of the things that was really refreshing and enlightening for me in my theological courses was that when you're looking at this concept of theology, it's not necessarily in a vacuum. It's not something that it lives within the seminary. It's not something that necessarily lives within the church, but it lives in the world experience. So for me, as Dr. Ware exposed to us, the dialogue that theology can have with science, or the dialogue that theology can have with anything. Excuse me, I think that theology intersects with any and everything that we experience as human beings. And in addition to that, engaging in a theology that's not necessarily giving an external critique, but also an internal critique. And sometimes that's a little tough, but I feel as though it's needed in order to usher us forward from a social, political, or economic perspective. So what I need to learn more of, one of our professors, Christian ethics, Dr. Cheryl Sanders, she said in one of our classes that the divinity school cannot teach you everything that you possibly need to know. But once you leave this place, hopefully this education will give you the means of knowing where to go, so pointing you in the right direction. So with that, I think I need to improve on a little bit of everything, but also developing my religious literacy and understanding different types of religions. In case I come across someone who's a Buddhist or someone who's a Hinduist, I'll be able to engage in an intellectual exchange, as Howard Thurman, was able to do when he went over to India and he was questioned on his Christianity and why he's a Christian. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
I'll go. They took my answers, by the way. So in an effort to not be too redundant, I think the biggest thing that I've gained has just been the sense of family, coming from an institution where I was given a 90% tuition scholarship. Of course, like any millennial would do, I followed the money. But it came with various dynamics, sitting in chapel services at the height of many tensions in the last year or so, praying for 38, 39 missionaries overseas by name and not saying anything about Black bodies being gunned down, seemingly on what it felt like a daily basis, a weekly basis. Being in those environments where I felt like I was asked to leave my Blackness outside the classroom to come engage in dialogue, where it wasn't really about diversity, but rather it was about assimilation. So coming into an environment where I was embraced holistically, where I see students from their 20s to their 70s or 80s in the same classrooms, dialoguing, helping people shape the formations of their theology. That's just been so refreshing because, as a preacher's kid, I come from a local church that was always nurturing, that encouraged my growth and my development. So being in that environment now academically has been so refreshing. It's been such a blessing for me because it reminds me of that family aspect that is so prevalent in the Black community. It's a village, and that's the biggest thing that's been so prevalent at Virginia Union. The biggest thing that I still want to develop is finding that indelible blend Dr. Kinney was talking about between scholarship and faith. Because in the local church, of course, we all know that everything from the classroom can't go to the pulpit. We know that very well. That's the quick way to get put out of a church. But I think finding that blend and understanding that, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to critique things. It's okay to understand and think critically why you believe what you believe. And it's not a sin to think. One of my mentors often says that thinking people ought to shout more and shouting people ought to think more. So finding that blend is something I'm looking forward to engaging in more so over the next year between now and graduation. But it's been a tremendous blessing just in my short time in Richmond that I was not getting it all where I was previously. So I'm thankful for that immensely.
Well, now, I think I probably have different experiences than some of the others. When I came to Hood, I've come out of traditional high church and everything, so I've been under some great pastors like the Reverend Dr. G. Ray Coleman and all of that. So I've gotten pulpit education, I've gotten Sunday school education. But when I got to Hood and we started with theology, I never thought about theology. But then getting the theology of Christianity and of the faith, that was eye-opening to me. And then to be able to put into words and into a theology some of my feelings. And I found out womanist theology was deep for me. And it's something that I am still in need of learning and honing. One of the things that I actually like about Hood is the diversity of not only the students, but the diversity of the staff. And we have some absolutely great teachers, but we learn not only from the staff, but we learn from each other, from the students, and we get a wealth of knowledge even from each other sitting at lunch, because I like the way we all have lunch together. The staff, the faculty, the school shuts down at lunchtime so that we all eat together. And it is not uncommon for the president to come sit at your table to eat with you and to talk on an intellectual level. And I like the small classes. We do have small classes, so it's very interchangeable. I'm having a wonderful time, and I'm at the point now where it's like I'm getting ready to graduate, but I don't want to graduate because then that means I have to leave. Because the classes are really great, and there's still more classes that I wish I was able to take, but it just didn't fall into it. But what everyone else has said is ditto. But those are some of the things that also I found at Hood, I think is very unique to Hood, is the diversity and the small classes and the interchanging of each other.
What I have learned thus far, being at the ITC, as we so lovingly call it, is to trust myself. I've learned that it's all right to use your sanctified imagination and pair them with your analytical skills to get a sermon that is colorful and informational and conveying the images that you want to project for your audience. I've also learned how to care for community in soul trauma. I've also learned that it's all right to be with peers, as well as it's all right to be with people who are not necessarily your peers, i.e. an interfaith dialogue. It's okay to be in a hospital setting and be asked to pray for someone who is not of the same faith or believe in the same God. I've learned how to articulate a prayer in such a manner that they appreciate and continue to look for me in that realm. What I would like to see as far as education in my school is a PhD program so that I won't have to leave my school.
I'm wondering if you could, this is a question I didn't ask you to prepare for, but if you could just tell us a favorite, I'll say a favorite, not the favorite professor, and what she or he teaches and why.
Well, I actually have two favorite professors.
Everyone wants to cheat on
But my systematic theology professor, I mean, because he opened my eyes to systematic theology. I never thought of theology, and to sit under Dr. Oppenheimer is, anything that he taught, I was taken. But the same thing with my worship and preaching professor. Anything Dr. Darren Mitchell, anything he taught, I was taken.
Next.
I'll go. It's probably a name that you may recognize. His name is Dr. John Kinney. He is currently my systematic theology professor too right now. And I chuckled because I was sitting back in the back, and I leaned over to Dr. Bond, and I said, what they don't know is I get this every week in class. But just the way that he breaks down material that I had never thought to think about, makes it come alive. Like I said, we had the square watermelons analogy last week, and it blew my mind today as much as it did last week. But just to see the brilliance of his mind, even after this many years in academia, and how much he still cares about students. I remember when I was looking to transfer, I emailed him what I was trying to do, and I put my phone number in there, not thinking anything of it. He called me once in class, and I saw it was a Richmond area code, so of course I left class to answer the phone. And I said, this is Mike Gaines. He said, this is John Kinney. I said, oh, snap. But just the fact that he cares to be that particular, to be that hands-on, that he cares about students, and just, you can find Union alums from years gone by, and they will all have the same stories about how much Dr. Kinney impacted their life. So just being able to be in that environment and seeing the successful transition between he and Dr. Walker, and just seeing how that play a part, it's been tremendous. It's been phenomenal.
Great. Next.
I would do a disservice if I chose one. In the spirit of Ubuntu, I am because you all are. So there are two that if I want to, and they're not here, but there are two. Dr. Beverly Wallace, who teaches pastoral care and counseling, and she is my advisor, accepted me from day one, took me under her wings. She teaches the neoclassical functions of pastoral care and the classical functions of, healing, restoration, healing, reconciliation, sustaining, guiding, nurturing, and then the neoclassical functions, which is liberation and advocacy. That's right up my line of thinking and work, the work I've been doing prior to seminary. And then Dr. Broadway, Michael Broadway. I came to Shaw to learn more about not only my heritage and not only about the Black church, but also how to organize within those communities in that church. And so Dr. Broadway helped me to understand and to put in practice, to put in practice how to organize. And so he teaches theology, but it's in a way that is shaped around social justice or justice work, and the prophetic tradition of the church, which I am still learning and love to learn. And so those two really, at this point in my journey, are helping to shape me in the direction that I wanted to go prior to seminary. And so for that, those two individuals, and there are many more that helped shape me, but if I had to pick those two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next. Go ahead.
I would have to say Dr. Sidney, well, he will be Dr. Professor Williams, Sidney Williams. He teaches ministry formation. I say Professor Williams because just as Dr. Kinney spoke on loving, listening, he too has taught me that it's important to love your congregation and the community in which you reach out to. And without loving, you have to listen in order to exuberate the love. And so with that being said, he opened my eyes to understand that it's not about what I want or what I desire for a congregation or for my community, but it's about listening to where they are and meeting them where they are instead of allowing myself to go in and think that I'm here and they're there.
It's a very hard question for me to answer, being that I am in a place where I am learning Portuguese and Greek, Hebrew. I'm learning how to preach. I'm learning so many different things. All of my professors are my favorite, but you told me to name one. So I will introduce everyone to one of my favorite professors, especially this year, and I will tell you why I will name this one this semester. Because
You said this.
This semester.
She said this semester.
I have been
I'm
told
with you.
by my spiritual father back in Cleveland, Ohio, that he could tell that I have been sitting under a preaching teacher. When he said that, he just imparted some big-headedness in my life, because now I know that I'm learning what this professor is giving me. This professor is not just teaching us homiletics. They're not just teaching us how to preach. They're not just teaching us your African heritage and Christianity in an African tradition. They are teaching us to trust ourselves in this walk. And in doing that, that's a lot for me, because being multiracial, multicultural, that's difficult. I've never had to choose a side. I've never had to formally shine the light on one culture or another. And this professor has given me encouragement and support in doing so. And I'm very appreciative, but I just would like to introduce you to Dr. Mark Lomax, who is my preaching professor, and he is my favorite this semester.
Dr. Lomax, you're on notice that next semester you may not be her favorite anymore. I would like all of you who are listening here to think of some questions that you might want to ask the panel. And I'm going to ask them one more question that I have. And while I'm asking that and they're answering, you can think. And then Teresa, I think, is going to have the microphone again. And so after this next series of answers, we'll be able to give you the chance to ask some questions from the panel. And then I'm going to reserve my very last question till the end. So we have plenty of time for you to ask questions, and also maybe some of you want to even respond to some of these things that have been brought up. My next question is, how are you personally going to make a difference? I realize that lives change, and none of us can predict our path going forward, really. But how are you preparing to make a difference to the Black church, the wider community, and the world? That's a big, tall order.
Very big question.
Take it in the chunk, whatever chunk you can take it in terms of how you're preparing to make a difference. Some of that may be just being a pastor in a local congregation, which is a very high calling. So don't feel like you have to make some kind of mammoth, world-changing answer when that's what your goal is. But go ahead.
Well, my heart is with outreach. I was born and raised in D.C., and John Wesley AME Zion Church sits on the corner of 14th and Corcoran. Years ago, the homeless slept on the steps of the church. We had choir rehearsal on Friday night. When we would come out of choir rehearsal, everyone else is rushing off. I would literally stand there and have conversations with the homeless. And everyone is saying, Tony, well, get in your car, we gotta go. I said, no, I'm standing here. And because most of them, majority, when you look at the homeless, you see mostly men. And so the conversation would start with one of them asking me for money. And I would say to them, don't you feel bad? You, a Black man, asking a Black woman for money. Why? It should be the other way around. And the conversation would start. And so then I would find out sometimes how they fall onto hard times. And, standing there, and what I found out is most of the times, they just need a listening ear. Mm-hmm. They just need somebody to hear them in their struggles and in their heartache, and to give some reasoning, and then to help them out. And I've always been one to lend a helping hand. I have my first pastorate now, and one of the things that I have said to the church, even though we are a struggling church, is a closed hand doesn't get anything. but it doesn't give anything, but it doesn't get anything either. So as long, I said, we're going to give as much as we can give, and we're going to help as many people as we can help. And in doing so, God will bless us. I'm a firm believer, if you reach out and reach down to lift, then God will bless you. So my intentions is to always seek and find ways to help those that are less fortunate, and to go into and do as the Bible says, go into the highways and the byways and seek the lost and give them some hope.
It is my prayer that I am able, when called upon to pastor, to be a source of encouragement and empowerment for women and the disenfranchised. Every one of us, including every culture, there are some disenfranchised. So my prayer is that I am the pastor for all people. And my prayer is also that my place of worship will be a place where we can train up children in the way that they should go. And that way includes community. I would like to be the type of pastor that brings wealth to meet economic brokenness and marry those two together so that we can develop a stronger community. This is across culture barrier. This is across any barrier because money is green. We have color barriers, and we are where the racism starts. So we should be where the racism ends and where community is being built. Because in the day of 46 minus 1, we're all at risk.
Well, my plan was to graduate and then eventually become a pastor. But my plans changed. God has answered a prayer already. So last week I became a pastor of a church, and so now my plan is to meet the people where they are, and to be able to build the church that God desires to be built, and not my will be done, but His will be done, and to be able to take what Payne has taught me about the Black experience, the religious experience, and be able to teach my people the significance of who we are and how we are who we are, and to be proud of that.
So when I leave Shaw, and I'm gonna cry, because it's just a blessing to be there. But when I leave Shaw, I plan to go back into my community and where I'm from, or wherever God placed me. I hope that it's somewhere in inner city, and to be amongst the people with, in the ministry of presence, and be a part of the struggle to help figure out how we can move forward. I take serious Luke 4:17 through 19, Jesus' mission statement. And so, to preach the good news, to proclaim the good news to the poor, to proclaim freedom of prisoners, and so forth. So what I do every day is that, as a profession, but it's not really a job for me, is that I work with youth in the juvenile justice system. And I try to share with them, not only provide them daily living skills or tools to do better, but I try to recapitulate, as Dr. Stevenson would say, the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that brings about, reconciliation and liberation. And so small little doses to them. But then I realized I have to work with the family too, the parents. So I cannot spend all this time with kids and not deal with or help address issues within the home. And so I think that somehow that will evolve over time, that piece. Also, just going back, working with the local organizations there. I think that is something that is very needed to bring us all together, that we might move forward in a way of solidarity. And then also, the last thing I want to say is, my long-term goal is, I was inspired when I did some research and development on the 1960s Freedom School. So all of what I said prior to this, I see it as being combined and condensed and put into a school where I can educate young African-American males starting and then young African-American females. Because I just feel like we have to, and then also Jeffrey Canada from the Children's Harlem Zone, School Zone, I used to follow him a few years ago, and the work that he is doing, I was like, man, I want to do that. So I want to impact the community in a way which we address the issues of the whole family, the family unit. So,
Great, thank you.
I love how he talked about the ministry of presence. That's vital. He used Luke chapter 4, so I'll use Micah 6:8. So where does the Lord require of us but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before our God? Like those who preceded me, I do in fact sense a call to pastoral ministry, and using that verse as a launching pad for what I believe I've been called to do. I've come to understand that sometimes doing justice isn't always best depicted by rushing to solutions. But sometimes doing justice, loving mercy, walking humbly includes surveying paradigms and circumstances that cause the problem that begs a solution. It was the Sunday following the inauguration that I was at my home church, and it was my last sermon before I went back to school. And my father, he was in a series on the Psalms. And you know, like any young preacher wanting to preach a farewell piece before you leave, I wanted to preach my happy piece that day. But I remember wrestling that week, and I couldn't shake the feelings that I had surrounding that inauguration. And I remember I used as a resource, I used Psalm 137, how can we sing Zion songs in a strange land? And as a part of that, I used Dr. Yolanda Pierce's piece, A Litany for Those Not Yet Ready for Healing. And I was talking about oftentimes we try to put Band-Aids on gashes because we're used to rushing to solutions instead of wrestling with the problems that got us to where we are. So in seeing that in a hermeneutic of justice and understanding where we are, how we best move forward, really be able to deal with circumstances and sit with families and look at paradigms and critique systems that cause us to deal with a 45 or a Me Too movement or the fact that Flint still doesn't have clean water, things of that nature. So I really feel a call to that because oftentimes pastoral ministry is often glamorized by the Sunday morning experience, but there's so much more to what we do than just that moment. My dad says all the time, he says, if you want to know the effectiveness of a pastor, don't go see them preach revival, see them preach a funeral. Because that encapsulates the fact that what we do predominantly is people. And if you can't minister to people effectively, then you'll have a very hard time in pastoral ministry. But seeing that paradigm modeled has really become a paradigm for me going forward, because seeing how necessary it's going to be able to relate to people, not just on the mountain but in the valley, and how they get through moments of crisis, because crisis is very real. It doesn't matter who you are, how much you have, crisis cannot be avoided. So seeing those moments and being able to deal with those effectively, that's really why I feel called in my pastoral ministry, wherever God shall send, as God has a way of doing.
For me, I'm a huge proponent of education, and for my plans, ironically enough, I just received word yesterday that I'll be continuing my education at the doctoral level starting in the fall.
Amen.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I want to do is start a career in academia and be able to produce insightful scholarship, but scholarship that is not adulterated, and emphasis on adulterated. But in addition to producing scholarship, I also want to bridge that gap between the academy and the church. And one of the goals that I have is that whatever church that I'm serving at that particular point in time, you know, as I'm in the midst of my career in academia, is opening up a research center at a church. It could be an African American history, Africana studies, a research center, where scholarship can be easily accessible to the general populace. Because sometimes, the scholarship just remains in the academy and it never matriculates over to the people, that can benefit from hearing it. And not just, abstract scholarship that's using all of these fancy terms, but really scholarship that's transformative and helps usher, our community forward. So that's what I want to do. I just want to have a career in academia and still be engaged with the community, and that's through education.
Thank you, all of you. This has been terrific, and it's not over yet. I'm now going to open the floor, and if you'd like to ask a question to the panel, if it's to everyone, you could say that. Otherwise, you might want to identify which student, and I realize you may not remember their name, so we might have to be a little creative to figure out which student you want to address to. But please say your own name and your own institution to start out your question, just so we'll have a little context.
Virgil Lattimore, Hood Theological Seminary. If you were president or dean, what would be your highest priority?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
This is a trap, I'm just telling you.
I don't want to answer that.
No,
It's a trick question.
Well, I'll start. I think my highest priority would be Christian education. It is the foundation of what we're all about. Because if you don't have a firm foundation in Christian education, then as you're going and building the blocks, everything else it'll fall apart. So just like you need a good, firm foundation in everything, you need a firm foundation in education, and that what we are and who we are is Christian education. So we need a firm foundation in Christian education. I think I would rebuild or build up the Christian education department.
I think for me, it would be the budget. You have to have the money. You have to have the resources to do. We just live in a real world. And I say that because I remember I used to do a lot of volunteer work, and folk love you to do stuff for free. And I realized that, I got 4 boys and a wife at home. Time, is relatively free, but it ain't free. And so, yeah, one, is to understand the inner workings of finance and that department. Then you want to work towards support for your faculty. And then maybe you might need to get more faculty in if the budget, allows for it. Just having a diverse faculty. And then also, as dean, is that care about campus life to me. You want a lively fellowship of students and faculty. And so I think campus life is very important to breathing or giving life to those who come far and near. Yeah.
I'm glad he mentioned money because I was going to. I think diversity in faculty, that's the easy answer. Of course, we all believe in that. But I think the financial aspect is vital, it's crucial, especially now being that I'm a recruiter. I get to go to a lot of fairs, and of course, the first question I always get is, what do y'all have financially? And I understand that coming from an environment somewhat of privilege, I was able to relocate from Lexington solely for the school. But a lot of the people that I recruit cannot do that. They have families, they have churches, and just frankly, just financially, they just cannot make that move to relocate to the Richmond area. But also in looking at programs and things that we want to put in place, those things are not free. And a lot of times, prospective students that I've been exposed to, that I've been able to encounter, a lot of times they want to compare apples to apples to all the schools they're looking at. But you got to understand that a lot of the resources that are given to our predominantly white institutions are not given to us as freely or as liberally. So I think if I was coming to an institution, you got to understand that find out our priorities for what we want to do, and then find the funds to do it for liberative programs, to attract students, to get top-notch faculty, because Vision is free, but the execution of it is not. Everybody loves to dream, but it takes real funding to make that happen, and having that support from donors, from alums, from people that believe in your vision and want to help give to it, I think is vital to make things happen and to bring in faculty and students and those who can contribute to what you're trying to do in the process.
Can I push it, Dean Pierce? Being the president of the Student Government Association at Howard, I've been exposed to a lot of things that have been occurring at the School of Divinity and Howard University at large. And just to piggyback on what was previously stated, finances, yes, but most importantly, culture. Because you can have all the finances in the world, but if you don't got the right culture, things happen. Bad things happen. So it's about instituting a culture where everyone from the top to the bottom, and Dean Pierce is working vigorously to institute that culture at our institution. Not to say that everything is terrible or bad, but at the same time, we want to ensure that everyone affiliated, with our institution is approaching their work with excellence and is bringing their best self day in and day out. And although we do have bad days, but on a general scale, ensuring that everyone is bringing their best self and breathing life into the institution, and not only like at the School of Divinity, but Howard University at large. So I think above all else, you gotta have a foundation of a secure culture in order to move forward and be the change that you wanna see.
Without money, you can't prosper, you can't grow, and without scholars, you can't thrive. So I would say that finance and scholarship are very important.
I too am a student government president, and I too sit at the table and listen to discussion, but I have to say, not pumping up my president or my dean because they're here, I would continue to do what they're doing going forth, because we are growing and we are prospering and we are sitting at the table making new resources. So, yes.
Can I just add this? And I was just talking to Dean Johnny Hill back there at Shaw Divinity. I too, as my fellow students here, am president of our GSGA. So a lot of times I will talk with Dean Hill about ways in which we can make the divinity side and the graduate education program side better. And we came up, we understand that community buy-in, right? Support. When I first talked about the budget financing, you need buy-in from the community. And who is in our community? Well, we have local churches in our community. We in North Carolina, in Raleigh, North Carolina, we get great support from the General Baptist Convention. And so just continuing to build on that support, and I think it's about 17 congregations within there, maybe more. Yeah, and so just continue to reach out to them and other churches that we have not branched out to, and saying, hey, support us, because we're building tomorrow's leaders, and they will in turn go back into the community and assist. So it's that dialogue that needs to be created in terms of finance.
Another question?
Amy Larimore, consultant around raising resources. What do the schools have to do in order to earn your first and forever gifts back to the institution?
I'll go on that one. Love me. Love me. Love me. Show that you love me. And where I feel loved is where I give back.
I would like to ditto that. I would like to add in my institution, is an institution of love. Ever since I first stepped foot on the campus, I felt that. And what I put in is what I want to take out. And I do, once I graduate, and actually I'm not even waiting to graduate because we have a campaign now where we're doing 60 for 60. And we're all going to be, we're fighting for 100% participation, ITC. So we're all just giving in. And for me to give back, it's not an option not to. And therefore, I feel like I need to get some numbers to hit the lottery, to make $1 million. So I can invest all of that into my school. I wouldn't, if I came into something, I don't even have to come into anything big. It's what I do have. As far as resources, I am a human resource. Therefore, if I don't have the funding that I would love to give, I will give what I have, as well as become a human resource for my school.
For 4 years, Hood Theological Seminary has been pouring into me. I am the SGA president, and one of the things I started this year was a campaign to present the school with a check at graduation. So we've been working all year, and I've been encouraging everything that we do as a student government is to raise money, because the school is not going to thrive without us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that I am pastoring now, because in the 4th Sunday in this month, I'm having actually Hood Day at my church to raise awareness of Hood and to try and pull in the alumni, as well as to encourage students to come to Hood on all day on the 4th Sunday at my church, and you know, so we can get the Alumni Association in Winston-Salem up and running very well. And just like it was said earlier, if the school loves on you, and Hood has literally loved on and loves on everyone that comes there, so it kind of makes it easy to want to give back. But I'm encouraging even the next administration to step up and to continue with the giving. So it is, and I am going to encourage my graduating classmates to also, and challenge them with a number to give back, so that we can be 100% each year in giving back to Hood.
Yeah, I would say that too. I want Shaw University to give me all that Shaw has available, everything that, just give it to me and invest in me, right? So that when they invest in me, I invest back. Even now, before I can consider myself an alumni, you know, well, after graduation. Last year, I took the kids I work with in my youth program, juvenile justice program, to tour Shaw University Divinity School. So I'm giving back now. And so I say, Shaw, give me everything you have to offer me. I intentionally came to Shaw. I pushed away. I didn't run a second term for NAACP president, because when I talked to my advisor, I was just at this place where I had to choose. And so after talking with her, I chose Shaw over the work that I was doing in the community for a period of time, because I wanted to be the best student I could be. And so I say that, you know, with all humility, but with this yearning desire, Shaw, give me everything you have, because in turn, I'm going to give it to those kids I work with, and they're going to be the next students to come on that campus. Because I work with kids that would not otherwise think about college. They care nothing about it. They're not having that conversation at the dinner table. And so when they see Mr. Mumford, and I begin to share with them my experience and how Shaw, you know, you guys, y'all, maybe I'm telling you too much, I don't know, but I received scholarship money after applying UNC, Shaw, UNCF, Shaw's alumni, $9,200 in just this last academic year, because I'm pushing. I want to experience, and I don't want to be hung up on this fact that but in the back of my mind, I got this big bill to pay. But Shaw made that available. And what I'm saying is continue to make those things available so that when I get these kids I work with and I convince them to come to college, to come to higher education, they'll remember that, well, Mr. Mumford said that these things were available to me. And so, yes, I even went so far as, in my closing, one day I was at the bookstore and I was trying to find a license plate, the little license to go around the license plate, and not really thinking I had picked up one that said Shaw Alumni. So I put it on my car. I'm still not thinking. I'm just happy because I'm at Shaw and I'm riding around with an alumni. I ain't even an alumni yet. But I'm already positioned myself as someone who's going to give back to Shaw and reinvest in Shaw.
So clearly you all caught the fact that he's a preacher because he said, I'm closing now.
Yeah.
I chuckle because the question was framed to say, what does your school have to do to earn that gift? I think STVU has there's nothing left they need to do to earn my gift because they've invested so much into me in such a very short time. I think the only thing I guess you could say is to continue to create opportunities for those coming behind me. I know the church that I serve at in Virginia, we give regularly. My home church back home has made a couple of gifts. So the value is there. It's just the continuancy to pour into that fountain to ensure that just like I was able to come because of an opportunity, that people behind me can come for years to come, and that it's never a case of we want to continue at this level, but due to our funding, we're at this level. So making sure that the mothership stays healthy, if you will.
Micah McCreary, President, New Brunswick Theological Seminary. My question is, you've just had a conversation with some of your peers about the relevancy of theological education for people of color, but then you're invited to have a conversation with a national leader who is self-absorbed, doesn't have empathy, and sees no body but himself as important of relevance. And you know that this person has just sent people away from a border rather than inviting them and helping them, wants to actually prevent them from entering, and you have an opportunity to have a statement to this person. What would you say?
Eric should start because he didn't get the answer last one.
Micah?
Well, no,
I said Eric could start because he didn't get the last one.
Eric.
yeah. I actually wanted to ask the last question. I'll answer that question as well. But the previous question, do we have time for that?
Okay, but yeah, sure. Answer the last question and then we'll
Okay,
come back to
okay.
this.
All right, so what I will say in regards to what Howard has to do to earn my willingness to give, it's already been earned. Individually, I've had a really phenomenal experience, at Howard through, the guidance I've received from Dr. Ware, the conversations that I've had with Dean Pierce, and even with Dr. Pollard. Last school year, towards the end of last school year, it was around graduation time, I had a conversation with Dr. Pollard about my plans for the summer. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but he informed me that there was an opportunity to go down to Tuskegee University at the National Bioethics Center. And I took advantage of that opportunity and engaged in research regarding the United States Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee. And I was able to write a research paper outlining the public health ethics problematic as well as the theological implications of that study. And as a result, I used that paper as my writing sample to get admitted into the doctoral program that I'll be starting in the fall. So Howard has been really good to me as an individual. Now, given that we're a school of divinity, we're not standalone. We're under the umbrella of Howard University. And sometimes that poses challenges. And sometimes you'll hear, people within that space saying that they believe that the School of Divinity is the moral center of the university. And sometimes that's not really shown, or you don't really see the effort that is being put forth in order to position us in such a way. And with respect to that, I think of Willie Jennings and his conception of whiteness, and he states that whiteness is not necessarily the opposite of blackness, but rather whiteness is a way of positioning yourself as the center of the world and everything revolving around you. So you can be a black institution, but white. You can have dark pigmentation, you can have all the melanin in the world, but be white. And that's, something, that I see sometimes, within our space. But to answer your question regarding what I would say to 45, you're referring to 45. So I've read a couple books throughout the past few weeks. I read a book entitled When Affirmative Action Was White by Ira Katznelson. I read a book called White Rage by Carol Anderson. And I'm engaging in literature right now regarding the concept of neoliberalism. And I feel as though neoliberalism is really the new racism, so neo-racism. So looking at the concept of neoliberalism, you will see that it advocates for the deregulation of the market and the privatization of the public sector, which results in the privatization of the prison system, which we already see the implications of that. It results in the privatization of the healthcare system. We see the implications of that. And it also results in the privatization of the education system. One of the most alarming appointments of 45 is Betsy DeVos and her belief that students should have school choice, because at the end of the day, our people have no choice. And really, that ideology is really another battle against Brown versus the Board of Education. And if you're looking to privatize, all of our schools with no regulation, then there's no reports going out. It just further marginalizes our people and throws them off to the margins while the wealthy gets all the education in the world. And then we widen these disparities as far as education, as far as employment, as far as health. So what I would say is just giving like an assessment, of, what's going on in our country. I'm well aware of what's going on in our country, and whether you're with us or against us, we're going to galvanize a group together and fight, for justice, socially, politically, and economically. I can't really focus on 45 because when people say this is the age of Trump, I dismiss that. This is the age of America. This has been America since its inception. Trump is just a manifestation of that. He's a manifestation of that original sin, which Jim Wallace speaks to. So my focus is not necessarily on Trump per se. Yes, he's a figure that we have to deal with at this point in time. But whether Trump's in office or out of office, we are still going to deal with these implications. We're still going to deal with injustice. So I don't want to be under the notion that, we vote him out or he gets impeached or whatever, we can just relax. Because when we elected Barack Obama, we thought we were in a post-racial society. No, we in a post-racist society. So that's what I would do. That's what I would say. And with you or without you, you're not my primary focus. I'll pay attention to what you do, but I'm going to continue to move forward and do what's best for my community.
Could we have perhaps just one more response to this question from someone who'd like to volunteer before we move to our last question? We only have 11 minutes left.
I would like to volunteer and answer for that question. Had I met such a leader, Dr. McCrary, I would secure 15 minutes of their time. In the first minute, I would introduce myself, in the next 10 minutes, I would preach to them a sermon about how God used the Queen of Sheba from Ethiopia to bless and turn out Solomon of Israel. And the last 4 minutes, I would address the implications of his supremacy and give him the relevance of that story.
The church said amen.
Amen. My last question, which I would love for all of you to answer, taking 1 minute each, is succinctly in your mind, what is the gift of Black theological education?
I'll go first. I think it's being a part of a movement of liberation. I think it's a part of being in something that goes back to our past so that we will be able to take it towards our future. That's it.
Yeah, for me, and I mentioned it before, it is that South African philosophy, Ubuntu. It's I am because you all are, and it's recognizing that I stand on the shoulders of great men and women of faith, and who have done the work and still continue to do the work. And that in and of itself is a gift to me, but this gift is not for me to keep, but to pass on. As Jesus says, freely you were given, freely you have received, freely you give. And so it is then after I receive it and do the work that then I go back to my community and give back what I received from those who went before me. So again, it's this giving back to my community for me.
If you ever see a turtle on a fence post, you know he didn't get there by himself. Piggybacking off the last two speakers, I think it's viewing the text from hermeneutic of liberation, understanding that this is not a new discovery, but rather it's been passed down through generations of our ancestors. It's the same theology that led us out of slavery through Reconstruction, that has brought us to 2018 in this current society we're in now. But understanding that liberation undergird everything we do, theologically speaking, and just being able to pass on that rich legacy because people pass it to us, and keeping that going to those coming behind us, because just like my brother said before me, we're not getting all this education to keep it to ourselves,
That's right.
but rather understanding that there's another generation of scholars and church leaders and pastors and presidents who can see individuals who have come through these institutions successfully, and they can look at us and say, they did it, I can do it now. But that takes intentional effort on our part to not just enjoy what we've learned and pat ourselves in the back because we're scholars and we have MDivs now, but understanding that we have a job left to do, and then being intentional enough to execute that to the best of our abilities.
Black theology, the gift of Black theology is that it is the moral conscience of society. It's a theological perspective that bridges the duality between personal sin and social sin, where personal sin, you focus on the individual, you focus on the soul, you really don't have any type of involvement or implicated in what's going on in the social realm of systematic oppression. So it bridges the two. And it's not just for Black people, it's for people. It speaks, to the plight of all marginalized groups of individuals. And I think of the judgment of the nations, the sheep and the goats. Black theology speaks to those who are hungry. Black theology speaks to those who are thirsty. Black theology speaks to those who are naked. Black theology speaks to those who are sick. Black theology speaks to those who are in prison. Black theology speaks to the least of these. That is the gift of Black theology. That Black people can come together with all that we've been through And the fact that we're still sane and still have the oomph and the energy to continuously speak to these issues that we've been dealing with for hundreds of years, that's a gift that our country has failed to fully appreciate. But we shall continue.
I did not get to where I am on my own. There were people that encouraged me. There were people that believed in me even when I did not believe in myself. I stand on the shoulders of family ancestors that did not have and that could not get. And then I also stand on the shoulders of church ancestors that paved the way for me to be where I am. I stand on the shoulders and on the encouragement of my current teachers and professors and church leaders that believe that I can. So it would be a disservice to them if I don't reach back and pull someone else or pull a whole generation. It is our responsibility as theologians, as Christians, because Christ said, what you do to the least of these,
Go ahead now.
you also do unto him.
Go ahead.
So if he made way for us to get to where we are today, we must make a way for others to not only get to where we are, but to get higher and to exceed even more.
The gift of Black theology, to me, is the empowerment of a people who have been disenfranchised. It is giving them hope spiritually, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, and financially. We know that this world was not created equal for all people, men or women. And therefore, this gift is a necessary gift. It is the gift of paying it forward. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And it's a gift that is given to us to be able to partake in this theological education. And then it is a responsibility of ours to be accountable for what we do with our gift and paying it forward.
I don't know how anyone could be discouraged about the future after hearing this panel. Thank you all for your participation. It's been an honor for me to be a moderator for it and to hear your wisdom. We have a break now for the next 30 minutes, so please enjoy conversation with the panelists and with others. I just want to tell you all that between 4 and 6 o'clock this afternoon, while you're breaking and having a reception, I'm going to be doing one-on-one interviews with each of these students for 15 minutes apiece in another room so that we can capture, not live, but on video, some of their individual insights, and then we're going to edit those into videos that can be used by the individual schools. So I'm really excited about that project, and clearly these are well-qualified spokespeople for their institutions. So thank you all again, and enjoy your break for the next 30 minutes.